Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Al-Azouzi from easymedicaldevice.com, and today we'll talk about a nice topic or a preferred topic of a lot of design and developer for medical devices, which is usability. So usability is really a term that we hear a lot. We also hear the term human factors, and the idea now is to tell you more about what this is and how you should consider this kind of activity there. So, and for that, I have with me Michael Engler from Benkana Interfaces. So, Michael, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Hi, Munir. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. So thank you, Michael. So I remember that we met in Berlin, and then we had to discuss. I was asking you those questions about usability, and then I said, okay, can you come to my podcast and let's have the discussion directly in the podcast? And it was really great. So I'm really happy that you are here. So for the people that don't know you, can we just have a small introduction of yourself, who you are exactly?
Yeah, hi, I'm Michael. I am one of the two co-founders of Benkana Interfaces, and we're basically doing nothing else but medical device usability and human factors. This is really what our company is about. And yeah, I do this since about 2009. And yeah, I'm part of the IEC committee, the joint working group for, well, people will not recognize that anyhow, but it's the standards committee on IEC 62366-1.
Exactly, and mainly this is the main standard that we'll be talking about today, because as said, this is an activity that most of the companies should be doing, but yeah, there are still a lot of questions that I'm resolving about usability, how to do that, when to do that, who to do that, etc. So it's why I wanted you to be here, just to answer those questions and to tell more of your experience. As you've said, you are here since 2009 doing all that, so you have seen mainly a lot of companies and a lot of those activities done, so you know what is good, bad, and maybe the ugly also. So let's look at that. So first, what I wanted to ask you is mainly for the people that also maybe are starting on this activity, if you can explain the term usability.
It's actually a quite interesting term because we have three concepts that relate to it, and it's a measurable thing, which is kind of surprising for a lot of people who come and join and see this term. And the first thing really is, are people who are using your device, your users, are they effective? The second thing is, are they efficient? And the third thing is, are they satisfied? And these three concepts can be measured quite easily. We can observe how people reach their goals that they have. So that's really the effectiveness part. Then we have the efficiency part, where we just take a stopwatch while watching them. And the third bit is something where we need the psychologists, and those psychologists, they just have questionnaires, and we can use those validated questionnaires to measure their satisfaction. So that's basically the main concept. And the idea of usability is that we don't look at the device itself only, but the human interaction with the device. So we have basically the human in the loop in that topic. And that's the interesting bit, because obviously we're interacting with physicians and nurses and the patients themselves sometimes not. And
Exactly.
this is really the point. Yeah, so we're looking at the context of the device itself, and that is a bit different for many engineers, because many engineers are just looking at the device itself.
Exactly, and we have this concept with the ISO. We have another wording that is human factors that a lot of US people are using. Is there a difference on the practice on the ISO and on the human factor that US are talking about?
Yeah. So the FDA uses human factors and usability engineering kind of similar as in terminology. When you look at the clear human factors side, people in human factors might also look at things like, are the people who are actually using that, are they qualified? Is their personality correct, etc.? These are things the FDA isn't interested about. They are just interested in the device, and that's basically usability. And in that aspect, it is quite similar and pretty much the same thing. But when you would look at human factors, usually we'd go to aerospace and they would talk about things like how crew resource management, etc. How does a crew interact in certain cases? How do they work in emergency cases? But that's not interested. That's not the topic of the FDA. So you can say it's equivalent.
So we talked about the standards, so mainly IEC 62366, which is one of the standards that is involved on that. Is this the main standard, or is there any other small standard that we have also to look at?
Yeah, so the IEC 62366-1 is the normative part, and then there's the explanation part, which is a TR, a technical report, which also explains more on what usability is and gives you some context. Actually, it's funny because when you read the -2, you see text that is in italic and you see text that is not in italic. The italic text is just additional information that goes beyond being compliant. And IEC 62366-1 only focuses on safety, whereas the -2 also gives you idea how to improve the device, for example.
Exactly. So because here the whole point is mainly to be sure that the people that will be using the device know how to use it and don't make any mistake by using it and read correctly the instructions and everything. So the idea is mainly that we are improving our practice, that we don't need to be behind each user to tell them you have to do it like this or like that. It's self-explanatory, and we have everything that is really us as manufacturer. We have done all the job to make it like to put ourselves on the shoes of the user and then to make this as easy as possible for them to use the device.
Yeah, and the interesting point is that many people think usability is about being intuitive, but we always ask for whom. For a physician, something might be very intuitive, but for me, it might not be at all, because I'm not a physician, I'm not a trained oncologist. So that is a very important concept to remember, that we are not only looking at the device, but we are also looking at a very specific user group. Yeah, so that's an important thing to remember.
Exactly. And so now that we have a clear understanding of mainly what is usability, so when in a project, when I will try to make like a medical device, so when should I start to think of usability? So is this something that I should think even before I have a prototype, or is it after, or is it at the end when we have all the project that is done? So what is exactly the steps that you would recommend mainly on that?
Yeah. And maybe we can combine this with taking us through a process of how do I do this ideally. I always say in usability engineering, when a client calls, it's already too late.
Okay.
So you can't start too early with that. As soon as you have an idea for a product, you have not written down any intended use, no documentation, nothing yet. You got the idea. You can start usability engineering, and you should. Or maybe you could call it user experience as well, because that would be a larger concept where we look, oh, does it look nice? And we don't only look at the safety parts. So we could look at user research. We understand who are the users. We understand the context. We give you a description of what's going on. What are the tasks and goals of people who are actually using or will be using our new device? Even if it's a very, very innovative product, we can still do that. And then we can as well look at resources that people have, for example, any kind of gloves, personal protective equipment, or other medical devices in the surroundings would be resources. And in that respect, it's quite interesting to see what kind of aspects we can find out. And then we can come back and say, by the way, hey, these are aspects that people will use, and this is how they behave right now. And we want to change that behavior, because obviously a new device will change their behavior. And hopefully we do that in a way that people understand it in the end, because the new device brings an innovation into their context, and they then understand, hey, cool, I can do things much quicker. I can do things way better with the new device. So that will be the early part. And that is something that is not regulated. It's called user research. The next step would be, okay, we need to formalize. We got an intended use. And actually the standard says, by the way, the use specification, which is one of the parts that the standard requires us to write about users and the environment in which the device is being used, that is actually being taken in a set so that we describe and inform the intended use. That was the idea of the standard. That never happens. We do that afterwards usually. Hey, but yeah, people writing standards are sometimes obviously not always on the side of practicalities. So from then on, what happens next is basically still on paper, still design input phase. We're looking at the device and we can describe the interaction between humans and the device in a very high level form. We don't need to describe buttons, windows, text fields, etc. We just describe, hey, I'm entering the patient name, I'm entering the patient weight, I'm entering the patient sex, etc., so that I can then start a process, for example, for dialysis or whatever. Yeah. So, and once I have that interaction, I can derive requirements possibly if I would want to. I can clearly then derive use errors. And that's the central concept of IEC 62366-1. These use errors can go into risk analysis. And in your risk analysis, or in our risk analysis, we will find what needs to be mitigated and what not. And from there on, we get further requirements. We write our user interface specification. Maybe there are several requirements levels in between from a technical point of view, but those user requirements are pretty much on the level of software requirements, somewhere there, mechanical requirements, electrical requirements, and then we have a specifics, how does the user interface really interact with the user? Yeah, and from there on, we can then derive prototypes and then people build stuff really, yeah? So then an engineer can go off, or someone who is a user interface designer if we would be talking about software as a medical device or just software. And then someone who is an industrial designer can go off and design a device from these activities, from the requirements and the use scenarios and the use errors. And from then, we obviously help, hopefully, some kind of prototype. We don't even need code or anything. And that prototype can be non-functional. It can be a cardboard box with knobs in wooden knobs, etc. Or we need to put a tablet somewhere where we can have a Figma prototype on, and then people can click through and we can test, we can evaluate. That will be a formative evaluation, and we'll probably come to that later on. We'll form the device still by hopefully changing it and improving the way people work with it. And then in the end, we get to the summative evaluation, where we hopefully can say everything is correct and people can use the device safely.
Hey, just a second. Do you need a EU, Swiss or UK representative? Then choose Easy Medical Device. We can represent you and also become your importer. Contact us at eo@easymedicaldevice.com. Exactly. And as we talked about user risks and also risk in general, so is there a link here between the IEC 62366, which is about usability, and the ISO 14971, which is about risk management for medical devices? So should we consider them at the same kind of level? One is more for users and the other is more for general risks about the device.
ISO 14971 is obviously the leading process, and that's where usability basically brings interfaces to. And there are several interfaces, and I've seen processes where there was no interface description. You can't be compliant if you don't have this interface between usability and risk management going on very clearly. And one of the main parts that are going across that interface, in my view, is at least the use error. Yeah, you know what's going wrong. You can put that in your sequence of events. From that sequence of events, you can derive any kind of hazardous situations, etc. And it's probably not the only part of the sequence of events, but that can be brought in there, and then you can analyze the things. You then get your risk control measures that need to be part of the user interface specification, which is a document required by IEC 62366-1. And then those use errors that we find out in evaluations, that we observe or hopefully don't observe because we've done a good job already, then we have to evaluate, do root cause analysis on those.
So now, if I am a startup company that I'm starting now to think about creating my software or my device, hardware, etc., and maybe arrived and listened to this podcast and listened to us, oh, I should do that, okay. So can this company do it by themselves, just by opening the IEC 62366 and do the job that is written inside, or do they need a laboratory, an external support to do that? So how they should, the logistic, how is the logistic for making all this?
Usually when you want to do it sensibly, you need someone who has a usability or human factors background. It doesn't have to be medical devices because these people are very hard to find. You have to send them once to a training course and then they can do it usually themselves. If you don't have that background, it's a steep learning curve. It's obviously doable, and I've seen it with many companies that it's doable, but be prepared that actually people could study human factors or usability. So there's a reason for that, yeah? Because obviously there's a lot of knowledge that goes into this thing. So from a perspective and from my heart as a usability expert, I would say, oh, definitely get a usability expert. But hey, I know a lot of people don't have one. So yes, you can do a lot of these things. What is probably the hardest part is actually the logistics and then the moderation of the evaluations, the formative ones and the summative ones. Yeah, so these are really the most important aspects, and they are a bit more difficult to do yourself. You can read books about it. Yes, there are good books about usability testing, not necessarily only for medical devices. Don't necessarily look at those.
Yeah.
Take the literature, and maybe we can put some of this in
show notes. Yeah, if you send that to me,
yeah.
I will put that on the show notes.
Yeah.
Here we have the knowledge, as you've said, of doing that, but you need, I think, also some people, some testers, some people that you will be like guinea pigs that will be doing the work, and you will observe and you will check what they are doing. So it's not only you have also to have some kind of volunteers.
Obviously, we need some, we call them either test person or participants. We intentionally don't call them subjects or any kind of, how you would say, they are not participants of a clinical study usually. So
exactly.
We're always trying to maneuver away from being a part of a clinical study, because obviously that's very expensive. So we are simulating a lot of things. We're simulating the use of the device. And for that, we will need participants, and these participants need to be recruited. Yeah, usually when we do this, we pay them money. If you, as a small startup company, have some founders or connections into the medical community, you can recruit them from there. It's usually good to have not only fans of your device, but also some people who are more critical, so that you get a good and breadth view of what's going on.
Exactly. And should those people, those people that will be testing the device will have some kind of skills on the device? Or, for example, we have some products like sutures. Should this be surgeons or nurses that are manipulating that, or I can take anybody from the street and say, can you come and follow the instruction and tell me if you are able to do that?
Obviously, we can't do that. We need the real intended users. Yeah, that's how the norm also, or the standard also says it. Yeah, so if we have intended users, we have a profile we've written in our use specification. Hopefully, if we've done it well, we can directly derive a questionnaire and say, by the way, are you a surgeon? Yes, okay, then you can take part. Are you specialized in orthopedics? Oh yes, you can take part. Oh, you don't do instrumentation of spines? Yeah, no, sorry, I can't have you in this test, because obviously that's the thing that we need for that. Because if people do these spine surgeries, obviously they will have special knowledge and skills, and they know what this is about. And the same is applicable for the technicians in the operating, for example.
So there is also the case where, when we are doing this kind of development, we are defining the intended population, and we can have some elderly people, some women, man, children, etc. etc. So in that case, should we also target all this population when we are doing this usability?
Obviously, that would be the case when we have home care devices and we have real patients interacting with these devices. For the European market, the requirements are rather less strict. Yeah, you can have one user group, and that's fine. And then for the American market, though, the FDA will probably want to see three. Yeah,
Okay.
elderly, normal adults, and young people.
Exactly. And in terms also of, because you said also before that clinical investigation can cost a lot, so it's why it's try to avoid that. Here, how many people are we needing for doing this kind of exercise here? So because as you said, we have also to invest maybe some money on paying people to be participating to that. So how many should we try to involve on the study?
That's the $1 million question
Yeah.
for Europe, but it's not the $1 million question for the US, because for the US, we can say that quite easily. The human factors guidance of the FDA says 15.
Exactly. Okay.
So that's easy. There is an MHRA guidance. So UKCA mark people, be aware. They kind of tell you 15 is good.
Okay.
And then there's obviously Europe, where there's nothing at all. And I can
Okay.
justify anything between 5 and whatever can be statistically significant and justified, which is a complex thing because you need to prognose the use errors that will happen. So it's not an easy statistics, and you can only do that over time if you want to do it correctly. In the end, I would not advise anyone to do a statistically justified approach to the amount of participants. Yeah, because the standard allows us to do qualitative research. Cool, let's do it. And in the end, one has to say, if we take 5, 10, or 15, it's a magic number, because we can't predict how many use errors there will be and how likely they are. And because of we don't even know if there's a bell curve for that. I don't know. Yeah. So the interesting bit will be, hey, how many do we take? What is good enough for us and for this device and for the risk level of the device? And anyone in Europe, you're fine with 5. Maybe your notified body may ask for more. If you tend to go to a notified body that used to be in the UK mostly, they tend to have a lot more knowledge about human factors. Other notified bodies are building up that knowledge over time, I would say.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is something that you have also to be careful and try to also justify somehow this kind of criteria, because in the clinical investigation, with the ways that we try to have as less patients as possible because it costs less money, but for statistics we need as many patients as possible to get more accurate data also. So it's finding the balance between all that. You talked before about formative and summative study. I wanted just to come back to that. So what can you re-explain again, what is the difference here? When are we talking about formative study and how often we should do that, and when are we talking about summative study and also how often we should do that?
Yeah, sure. So formative studies obviously form the device. So think Play-Doh. Yeah. So I got a device in Play-Doh and I can change everything that I want to. Yeah. So they are during development. The most valuable ones are with prototypes that are non-functional, no development effort, just industrial design, not design, but placing the functionality on the box and saying, does that work? Can people put the bag there? Can they reach the button? If it's up there, they can't reach it. Yeah. So these kind of things that you can try it out and you fail, and then you do another version and another version, possibly. Well, we probably only need one because we've learned a lot of things, and then we improve that for the next prototype, which might be already partly functional. For example, a little bit more software that works, or more of a design housing that that can be used, etc. pp. So what makes a lot of sense is to have your project plan aligned to these formative evaluations, and then drive it by saying, okay, at this point we want to have one, at that point we want to have one, and at that point we want to have one. And then drive the functionality so that you can test, does it actually work? Will people be able to use the device? And that can be, yeah, I've seen that in very mature companies, and that is a really good idea to drive usability through that. In my opinion, you need one formative evaluation.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a usability test. And we should talk about what is the usability test. It's basically observing people.
Yeah.
And that's something that many people don't understand as well in usability engineering, that we have participants who actually use our device and we observe. Usually we tape it as well on camera and get the sound recording, because otherwise it's hard to understand what they did when we look at the analysis. So this is all. This is really something that brings quality into usability tests. But the most important thing is observation.
And mainly, yeah, this observation is important. I see that also a lot of people that are trying to do that are trying also to talk to the people that are doing, say, oh, no, you should do it like this. No, you should refrain to do that. You should try to stay the back. You have just to observe, to find where they are making the mistakes and then finding a way to improve. But you should, like, because I know that there are a lot of experts, why he's doing like that? Why is it's like,
yeah. And it's what we usually do is the manufacturer sits in another room and they can watch on screens so that we have enough room to leverage if someone bites in the table because they can't use the device. So it's really important to understand that.
Exactly, yeah. So this is mainly formative and summative. What's that at the end exactly?
Yeah. So the idea is that we want to find out, is the device safe? Yes, no, maybe. Or can it be used safely even more specifically? Yeah. So that's the idea. It is 95% usability test, because otherwise the methodology, it's the gold standard. That's the one, that's what is being expected. And this is also what IEC 62366-1 expects, but it leaves you possibilities to use other methodologies. And that's intentional, and that is good, because sometimes you have very small changes on a device, and then having 5 people, for example, opening a package with a sterile component in it is just not sensible. Yeah, they open up the package and they go, yeah, here. So does that make the device safer or the interaction safer? No. But usually when you have a new device, you need to observe people how to do it. And then every single use error that occurs, we need to analyze it. If it's a new one, the standard actually requires us to start from the front. Well, there are ways out. When you find in risk management, okay, it wasn't that bad, but it's still hard to really understand how things could go on. And usually this loop is intentional, so it's important to really have that, and it's part of validation of the device. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So in terms of, as you've said, you have worked with many companies since many years. So do you see a common mistake, a common issues that they are all doing, and you know they will be doing that, so it's normal?
Yeah, start too late is the first one.
Okay.
It's very clear. You should start right at the beginning. Usability engineering, 50% of that standard is just design input, and possibly even earlier. Yeah. So having that is really something that is important. Yeah, starting early, because it can drive requirements, and it's just by fulfilling the standard, the device already gets better.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very likely to get much better than compared to not doing it, because you're thinking about the workflow. No one usually thinks about the workflow that a user will take through the device. All the engineers, they always think, oh, I have this bell and this whistle and this software button, and then there's no coherent workflow. And that's what a usability engineer can bring to the table, that we have this coherent workflow, and this makes the device already better. If you want to have an excellent device, you should do user research right at the beginning.
Okay.
So another common mistake is that people send out questionnaires for for the summative evaluation.
Okay.
That doesn't include observation. That's a problem. Yeah. And this is also a reason why having clinical studies as part of your usability evaluation does not work well, because we usually don't observe people, or if we observe them, for example, if we have any kind of implants and we observe, or we are in that clinical study setting where an implant is brought into someone, we won't see the use errors because there's 5 people who say, stop, don't do this. This is dangerous. Please do it differently. So yeah, clinical studies are mostly not showing really, and we won't find the root cause for what really is the problem in terms of usability. We will see that the device doesn't work that well, but people might even not aware that they do something wrong.
Yeah,
So
agree.
that's something that is really important. And
So,
yeah, then I find that use scenarios can be written far more easily than most people do it. But yeah, that's just in terms of how you do it then. The way people do it is compliant, but I see very often that it's inefficient.
So is there also a need for those manufacturers or those tests to be done in the exact environment where this product should be used, like for example in an hospital for certain devices, or at home because it's mainly where it's used, or in an ambulance because mainly this is where this device should be used. So is it also part of the usability to put the environment in question?
Of course, it is, but the most important part there is the simulation. In formative evaluations, it's not as important. In summative evaluations, you want to be much more specific about the use environment. On the other hand, in Europe, a lot of things will go through with not so much scrutiny on this part.
Okay. And any other type of advice or anything that you would recommend people out of those that you have just given for having a safe journey doing their usability?
Yeah, there's probably tons of things I could say. And it's really the question where to start. So we use a very specialized format of writing use errors because it's such a central element. I always try to train people to write use errors as a whole sentence with the user in there, so the user does something wrong or does not do something correctly, and have that as a sentence template, and then name the user role. So the physician doesn't clean the device would be a good use error.
Yeah.
And it's observable. Use errors should be observable. There are exceptions for that because obviously when you look at a diagnostic device, you will see, okay, there's a value and I need to read my blood sugar from the device. Okay, I'm reading it and I go, oh yeah, it's 75. Okay, when you want to have something observable, that would be how much insulin do they want to inject? So there's a lot of calculation in between, and there's a lot of reading in between. So did they read the correct unit, etc.? All these kind of things. We sometimes take an abbreviation on these diagnostic devices where we say, okay, when people just read it, it's fine with the correct unit, and then stop there.
Great. I think we have covered mainly what are the good practices, or is there a good usability practices, like we talk about good clinical practices, good manufacturing practices. So I hope that this is mainly the good usability practices and how to execute that. So mainly how you can help people that are listening now to maybe help them also to execute that.
Yeah.
So what's your company's, why people should maybe contact you for doing this exercise with you?
Yeah. We teach a lot of training courses that are not, we don't do it ourselves, but they are public courses. So we teach courses for example, Encotech and TÜV Rheinland and TÜV Süd. So we're there present in teaching. The next thing we do is we coach people to do it correctly.
Okay.
This would be, so I'm starting with a small budget and trying to get bigger. If you have more money, we can do parts of evaluations and also write some parts of the documentation for you, write use scenarios, etc., from our experience as well, or the use specification where we know where to research things, etc. And then we can do evaluations, obviously, which could be completely turnkey or as much. It's always a negotiation in between us of how much does the manufacturer want to do, how much can we do, and it's really, we try to make it accessible for every kind of company, and even we have startups and we have big corporates, we see kind of everything really, and we negotiate always how we can help best to bring that across the line and to get either an FDA approval. We could write the human factors engineering report that could be left to the customer. It really is up to the manufacturer to decide how much money they want to spend and how much time they have, etc.
So if I have a big budget and I say, okay, here is my product, do everything. So you are able to do everything, even to recruit the patients and even to do this observation, to do the report and everything. So it's also, I mean, you can do everything from A to Z. I give you just the products and you can do everything.
Yeah. So ideally, you would come with the idea, and then we, so that we start early, and then we go off and do user research, and we do everything, a turnkey usability engineering file with recruitment in US or in Europe, wherever is needed, and then go off and say, hey, this is your usability engineering file, thanks, and be done with it.
That's great. I mean, it's also important to have that too, because we have some customers that have no clue what we are talking about mainly sometimes, and they want to have the expert that are doing everything from A to Z, as long as they have the money to do the job. So which is really great. Okay, so mainly I will put all your details on the show notes. So don't hesitate also to send me the links maybe of the books that you are talking about, so that I can place them also on the show notes. And then the idea is mainly for people that are listening that if you have any question also about usability or things, so you can also send directly the messages to Michael and get some understanding, and maybe visit the webpage also of Benkana interfaces, so that you can have a better understanding also of what they can do if you have a project ongoing. So don't hesitate to contact Michael directly. Okay, so Michael, I really thank you very much for all the information you provided, and I wish you a nice day.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.